Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Series 10 of the Climate Pioneers Show. My name is Cherry, and I'm the founder of Above and Beyond Recruitment, a climate tech recruitment business working with startups and scale-ups to hire mission-driven talent and build their teams. And this series, we are speaking with founders who are focused on helping us adapt to climate change and make the world around us more resilient. They'll be sharing their journeys so far, the challenges they've faced, and the lessons that they have learned along the way. And if you are a founder yourself, hopefully these stories will inspire you, inform you, and maybe make you feel a little bit less alone on your founding journey. And if you are keen to join the mission to save the planet, then perhaps these episodes will spark some ideas of what you could be doing to help. Today, I am joined by Rozálie Ryčlová-Pribadi, Chief Strategy Officer and a driving force at MaxInfo. MaxInfo uses advanced analytics to help their customers move from reacting to disasters to anticipating them. The Financial Times has said that extreme weather and climate change have caused more financial damage in Europe just between 2020 and 2023 than it did in the whole preceding decade. So we're clearly entering a new era where predicting, anticipating, and managing these increasingly common events is more important than ever. And MaxInfo are building the tools to help organizations do just that. So Rozalie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Cherry. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Tell us more about MaxInfo. I've given a bit of an intro there to the problem and the changing world that we're in and how MaxInfo is playing their part in addressing that. But tell us a little bit more about the scale of this problem that you're solving and how the solution that you've built is addressing that problem.
Fantastic. So kind of as you highlighted, this is a really major and increasing problem. So I myself actually come from an insurance underwriting background, and I used to be supporting a insurer and reinsurer in Deloitte's market in underwriting energy assets. And, everybody comes into their business journey and into their startup journey with a personal story, and mine is actually the season of a very extraordinary hurricane season of hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, where our insured assets were really, really heavily hit. And at that time, I kind of, sometimes you have a bit of an aha moment in your work, or like sometimes like, you have this like plate smashing moment in your head. And I had, during this very bad hurricane season, I had kind of these three realizations. The first one of them was that there's this entire world of catastrophe modeling where you have access to all sorts of analytics, all sorts of insight about natural disasters, their patterns, how they might be changing, how they might be impacting you as somebody who holds assets, physical assets, like, actual sites. And I had these three realizations. The first one of them was that there's just so much knowledge out there that's continuously being updated. That's just really, really hard to put into practice when you're a risk taker and when you're somebody who really has to think about like these real life decisions. For me, it was about supporting the insurance underwriting of these assets. The second one was that, in this particularly bad season, I could, that there was so much happening all at the same time. And I had to, I was always in a place where I had to be asking people rather than systems for answers. So we're still missing a really strong ecosystem of understanding these problems of natural disasters. And last but not least, we're still in a place where we're really reactive to natural disasters and weather phenomena that cause very, very, very real damage to businesses and to individuals. And that there really is a huge scope for innovation, for becoming proactive and, switching from after event response to trying to anticipate what might be coming your way, and trying to be proactive in, how you can manage natural disasters and climate phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how did you devise a solution that kind of that managed to solve all of those problems?
So it was actually Tom, the founder of MaxInfo and CEO, who really came into it with this kind of like, scientific and commercial mindset on how to solve this problem. So, our founder and CEO, so I come from the industry, and our founder and CEO comes from academia and then jumped into industry, where we see this kind of, again, a bit of a disconnect of like just the sheer amount of knowledge, the sheer amount of information that's available in, the scientific and academic sphere and in the catastrophe modeling industry, and the disconnect from risk decision making, from taking on actual risks and making actual risk taking decisions, which is where I used to sit. So when Tom was starting the company, his mindset was really thinking, flip the equation around. So usually, in this kind of catastrophe modeling science, you're thinking about like, okay, so what is the information that I have available? What are the data sets I might have available? What is the analysis that I can bring to the table? And then somebody has to figure out how to use that. Whereas we kind of flip this on its head, and rather than going from this like A to Z, we're thinking from Z to A. What does an underwriter need? What does a decision maker need? What does an insurer need? What does somebody who's holding, again, a portfolio of properties or other physical assets need to become more resilient to the natural disasters? And how can we actually leverage what's already available to make it useful for them? What's important in the decision making and risk taking? And how can we build out appropriate information? How can we build out frameworks and analytics that actually really do support the decision making?
That's fascinating. So you're taking these kind of really complex models and this sort of very complicated set of data that exists out there and kind of making it digestible would be the wrong word, but making it useful and applicable to actual businesses that need to use this information in a real way.
Absolutely spot on. Yeah. Making all this information understandable and usable in a decision-making process. That's what we specialize in.
Amazing. And how challenging is that when you're sort of productizing this as a solution, and kind of where, I suppose, is the knowledge level at in your customer base already? And when you're building a solution to make it usable for them, how much of the education gap do you need to close in that process, right?
That's a really interesting question, actually, Sherry. So we usually work with very sophisticated customers. So there, of course, there's a range, but our customers tend to have quite a high degree of sophistication and knowledge about catastrophe modeling and about the space that they operate in. I mean, we are specializing currently on working with insurers and reinsurers. And these customers understand their trade and understand their business very, very well. But they can still benefit from a set of tools. They can still benefit from, a middleware platform or an orchestration platform that can make a job that can be often quite manual or that can be very time consuming to make it much, much easier. So, for example, our MVP that's currently in the market, our minimum viable product, is called Magnify. And we help cut down, on work streams in catastrophe model evaluation from work that would literally take months. And, the product of it would be hundreds of pages of reports that then somebody has to digest. It can collapse down into minutes or very, very short period of time. And the really important thing there is that we then enable our users for the so what. So when you cut out the time on the processing, the analytics, kind of the legwork, then you actually do have the time to, again, stop and think about, what does this mean for my portfolio? You can tie it back again, to the underwriter's chair. What does this mean for how I need to be protecting my assets from, what could be a very challenging hurricane season, or what could be a very challenging, say, hailstorm season, whatever it might be in Europe or closer to home. In the future, we're developing the product that's really going to focus on this kind of anticipatory piece. Again, how can we be more proactive? How can we develop new products for risk transferring? And again, for people outside of insurance, you can think of insurance as like one of those types of products. How can we manage risk transfer on climate exposed assets? Not after the event, but how can we do more before the event, or as the event is, say, when a hurricane might be coming up to make landfall.
Yeah, amazing. So your current MVP magnifies in the market, targeted at those insurers and reinsurers who you said have already got a good level of expertise and understanding of this problem. And really what your tool is doing is making that analysis phase faster, more efficient for them, which then frees them up to work on the the solution.
Yeah.
As you kind of access new markets, what other markets, what other customer segments are you potentially exploring, or do you see where MaxInfo's solution could really add some value?
This is a really good one. So we're all professionals coming out of insurance and reinsurance. So, we are first focusing on the market that we know. We're focusing on the problems that we're really, really familiar with. But this has just so much potential to step outside of insurance. Because when you think about it, basically, nobody is spared, from the impact of extreme weather events and extreme climate events. Like, sooner or later, every one of us is basically a decision maker on the risk to your asset. If you're a business, then it's going to be, again, say a portfolio of sites, but it can trickle down. We can see lots of use cases outside of insurance, reinsurance. It could be everything from, we actually already have partnerships with NGOs, humanitarian organizations. So there's a really strong use case on like really impact focused risk management. But, just keeping my commercial hat on, in the future, we can say support financial institutions who might be subject to climate change regulatory returns, financial institutions that hold loads of physical assets exposed to disasters. That's mortgages, that's mortgage portfolios of properties. These are all vulnerable. So we really don't shy away at this like really big scale problem where, we can really act as a big lever, where we can, right now, we're working with customers who really, really understand their catastrophe modeling. But in the future, we can kind of step out and make catastrophe more accessible to users who maybe don't have that really, really deep expertise and need a bit more support, need a platform that can help them understand the knowledge about catastrophes, natural disasters that's already out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Perfect. And in terms of geography and your kind of, I suppose, geographical focus, that you're a UK registered business team based in the UK. From a customer base, I mean, this increase in extreme weather events, I would assume, is going to disproportionately affect some parts of the world more than others, or not? I mean, talk us through, and therefore, does that affect which markets you go after? And talk us through that.
100% does. So our team is London/UK based. I think we're going to get into that. But we're a UK company. In the first instance, and we kind of think about, again, like the strongly commercial use case, and then kind of the impact reach that we can have beyond that. The strongly commercial use case for us is the US market. So we're focusing in the first instance on hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, and extreme wind events in the US. And we are absolutely expanding from that, but the US is the stepping stone market, and customers who have exposure to US events are kind of the big focus for us. The kind of more impact focused hats that we also wear is focusing on regions that are really vulnerable and maybe not as well served by current climate analytics solutions. So when we partner with humanitarian and aid organizations, we have a big focus on the global south, where we can really, really make a difference with the analytics and with the work that we do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And tell us more about your journey to joining MaxInfo. So you mentioned already that you have a background in the insurance and reinsurance market. You also worked in another tech startup scale-up environment as well, right, prior to joining MaxInfo. Tell us more about your journey and how you met and got to know the team at MaxInfo and join them.
Yeah, so I actually know Tom and the rest of the founding team from my insurance days, specifically because of this hurricane season that I mentioned. There was there was so much work to do. And Tom, the founder and CEO, is actually a hurricane scientist by background.
Wow.
So he had a lot of useful information for me at that time. I stepped out of the insurance industry after a few years to actually start my own company that was focused more on climate change mitigation than adaptation. And when I stepped out of my first company, it was actually just the time when Tom was building out a team, when Tom was starting to productize and really coming onto this startup journey. So it was a very, very good time for me to join. But I mean, I've known the founding team and Tom, the CEO, specifically for many years. So we've kind of been both building out the companies at a similar stage and always had really strong rapport and a strong support network.
Yeah, absolutely. And how was your background, both in terms of your industry expertise? I think it's kind of clear how that's helped you in this role, but in terms of your other kind of tech startup experience, helped inform your journey at MaxInfo. And yeah, what have you learned prior to joining that perhaps has helped you to make better decisions, helped you anticipate some of the challenges that you're going to face on this founding journey?
That's a really interesting one, Sherry. I think that like every entrepreneur will have been through their own like very winding journey. The big lesson I think I've brought into MaxInfo is just how important it is to be creative about your capital stack. So in my previous company, I've really learned that there's lots of other options other than just like raw VC capital. Of course, revenue, ARR, and like your customers is always the best source of funding to grow the company and build out the product. Yeah. But there's a fantastic ecosystem of not just VC partners, not just angel partners, but for example, we have a really strong partnership with Innovate UK, which has really, really enabled us to build out a new suite of products. It's also enabled us to maintain our focus on humanitarian organizations and enabled us to put some fantastic partnerships in place. So it's just really learning to think outside of the box about where your funding comes from. That's been a lesson that we've really, really leveraged in MaxInfo. And I would recommend every entrepreneur to think about not just VC funding, but also to think about angels and again research contracts and other projects of non-dilutive, non-equity funding that an early stage startup might be able to access.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us more, if you I appreciate there'll only be so much you can say, but about that relationship and how you started engaging with Innovate UK, because I know that they offer incredible support to startups and scale ups. In fact, I think they're one of the biggest investors into, climate startups in the UK, right? But they are a large and tricky to navigate organization sometimes. And so for startup founders out there listening to this that think, yeah, great, I'd love to do more with Innovate UK. What does that look like in practice? Because as I understand it, they have different pots of money for different initiatives and different types of solutions. And there can, I think, sometimes be a temptation from a founder's perspective to go in for a pot of funding to get the money, but actually what they have to do to get that funding doesn't necessarily move their product development on or their R&D on in the right direction. So how have you managed that in your relationship with Innovate UK? How were you strategic about what grants to go for, how to know where to found them, and how to leverage that support in the right way?
Yeah, so the first one is to be really deliberate about how you design your project. And just be aware that there's been big fluctuations in availability of funding from Innovate UK. There's been big fluctuations, say for example, with the Smart Grant. I haven't been following it recently, but it's really important to stay up to date with where Innovate UK is at, because the availability of funding changes, and sometimes it can be a bit of a I don't want to say murky landscape, but one that's like difficult to follow.
Yes.
So that is step number one is definitely just to stay in the loop with what's happening in Innovate UK, because it can be turbulent. The other thing is, exactly as you point out, to not fall into the trap of like making a project for the sake of getting a project. So I would, for example, suggest to be very strategic about the competitions that one will apply for, because yes, a project can be, a well-designed project can be a huge accelerator to the business and a huge value add to the business and product development. But a poorly designed project that is designed just to fit into a certain funding call can end up being the heavy ball on the entrepreneur's leg when you have locked yourself into deliverables that just really don't work. What I would really encourage founders to do is firstly be aware of the long timelines of working with Innovate UK, right? Like it's going to take you a month or two to write a bid. It's going to take you, a month or two to hear back. It's going to take to get to project setup, and only then you start the project. So you really want to be thinking about, your company's long-term product plans, your company's long-term innovation plans, what you can do as business as usual, and what's something really exciting that Innovate UK can help you fund that can be really additional to the business. The other thing is, Innovate UK are actually, quite reasonable people once you start working with them. So if there's big changes in the business and you figure out like, oh wow, this project just no longer works, there's your monitoring officer, there's going to be a lead of the competition, and they're all people who ultimately do want your company and the innovation to succeed. So I'd also just be very mindful of that like the mandate of Innovate UK is to, spur innovation activity in the UK and not to be a black hole for money for projects that are then going to be shelved somewhere. Yeah. And the people who, you will meet once the project has been set up, they are mindful of that, right? Like they want to meet this mandate and they want to help companies to succeed. So there's a really fine balance. And also my final word would be to be really proactive in leading the projects internally, especially with AI. There's been so many funding agencies and so many third parties that can claim to really help you in the process, but I would really encourage entrepreneurs to own the projects and to own the process really internally, because nobody other than yourself can figure out what's best for your business. And there can be, an easy trap to fall into, which is just like outsource the writing of the grant. You're so busy, there's so much going on. If you do take on the decision to take on grant funding, that really is something that's, a part of your business of a very long time. And, the best projects are the ones that are really deliberate and deliberately designed, that really fit into your business and not what a grant writer or a third-party agency might think is the best fit for a bid.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And you mentioned there about these processes through Innovate UK sometimes taking a lot longer than you expect them to, or it being quite a lengthy and drawn out process. And you'd mentioned about kind of angels being an important part of your capital stack at the beginning. How did you kind of layer in, I suppose, your support from angels with that kind of process you were running with Innovate UK? And also, how do you manage, because bringing angels on board they add immense value to a business, right? Especially if you're getting strategic angels involved. But it can be a really time-consuming process to identify those strategic angels and to convince them to come on board. So are you able to share a little bit about how you managed both those processes in tandem, whether in fact they were in tandem, and how you managed your strategy around raising angel investment?
Yeah, so with MaxInfo, we actually haven't done an angel round. So Maximum Information would be a bit of a separate case, but I can lean on my previous experience where absolutely angels can be a fantastic value add. In terms of like managing the process between angels and grant funding, grant funding can be a fantastic anchor to actually, be able to raise match funding and additional funding. So kind of, if you're successful in winning a grant, the fact that there's a bit of a time lag between when you find out and when you can actually start can, on the one hand, that can be a curse to the business. On the other hand, that can open up a time window with a really, really strong sense of urgency to say raise match funding for the grant or to raise additional funding for the grant. So I would 100%, encourage founders to have those long-term relationships with angels. And if the funding does come through, that can be a fantastic catalyst, like a fantastic, this kind of spark that gives rise to the spark to the fire. That's an unfortunate metaphor, but the catalyst to a great funding round where Innovate UK can be a less risky part of your funding stack, and then you can use it as an anchor for the angels. Also, Innovate UK are really selective about the projects that they pick. And having a partnership with Innovate definitely can be, a bit of a additional proof point of the strength of your business.
Absolutely. And I would imagine from that perspective, very useful when then going out for VC funding, to have that kind of, I suppose, feather in your cap from Innovate UK.
Yeah, 100%.
And how have you found that journey? So, hopefully you won't mind me sharing that, you have been on that VC fundraising journey recently. How have you found that experience as a business? Where did you decide to, when approaching VCs, look at those who really knew the financial services and insurance market, or those that were driven by the climate and impact of your solution, or both? And what did you find the kind of different challenges and objections you found with each one of those different types of investor?
Yeah, absolutely. So we found a lot of traction from insurtech specific VCs because they really understand our space. They understand the problem that we're solving, and they really, they appreciate the size of the market, the dynamics of the market. So it has been really helpful for us to have specialists support us on the journey. I will say that I'm excited for us to have more impact and climate-focused VCs on board, because insurance is some would consider it maybe a bit of a drier space, and it's one that can be quite hard to understand. Again, regulated environment, lots of stakeholders. It's a very specific ecosystem and a very, very specific market. Every founder will say their market is very, very specific, and then every entrepreneur will say that, but I won't be an exception. So we're really excited to get connected with more impact VCs down the path for us. I will say that for us, I've talked quite a bit about the impact that we already have and that we aim to have beyond just the commercial impact. So I think that just communicating that like really strongly to the next cohort of VCs for our next funding round is going to be really, really key for us.
Yeah. And I think there'll be that interesting distinction, I would imagine, between those two groups of investors in terms of how you're presenting the opportunity, like the investability of what you're building to each one of those different groups. And yeah, I can imagine there'll be some interesting distinctions / maybe tensions in how you kind of build a pitch for each one of those different parties and their respective interests, right?
Yeah, they can be quite different pitches. And again, everybody who's been fundraising will know that, you need to be kind of pitching and communicating in a way that really fits your audience. So again, that's going to be a really exciting next step of our journey as the company grows.
Yes, go to them where they are, they say. And I mean, this is a notoriously challenging market to be fundraising in, right? And VC expectations are, I suppose, higher, more challenging to meet than they were 3 years ago. From your experience over this last few months, how challenging was it to meet those expectations? How have you seen those expectations shift since perhaps last time you raised?
Oof. Again, a very, very, very good one. The market definitely is more cautious now, I would say, than it would have been, say, around 2021. So our experience has been that you want to be ready for a fundraising campaign that maybe is going to take longer than you expect. So I would say that 6 months would be, a healthy minimum to assume for a funding round now. Again, from my experience, investors, they're out there, they want to deploy capital, but they are more cautious.
Yes.
So, the entire process of diligencing the business is going to be very thorough. Now, that's not to say that it wasn't thorough before, but you can see that it takes longer time to land on a decision from a VC investor these days. For some people, that's going to play in their favor, because this kind of longer relationship also gives you an opportunity to kind of, have a relationship where you say what you're going to say, and investors will actually see you deliver on those promises. When you say, I'm going to have XYZ clients, XYZ revenue, you have the opportunity to demonstrate that you really can deliver on your promises, which is a really good foundation for the relationship going forward. But I would definitely come into a fundraising campaign with a pretty robust runway.
Amazing. I love that silver lining and that optimism. I am, if anyone who knows me outside of watching this knows me at all, I am an eternal optimist, and I will look for the silver lining in just about anything. So I really like that you brought that. That was great. Perfect. And tell us a bit more about kind of building your team out at MaxInfo. Like how many people are you today? How many people were you when you joined? And what has that journey from then to now looked like in terms of team building?
I'd say we're actually again, every entrepreneur will say they're a unique team. MaxInfo is a really unique team. So again, we are built around kind of our founder CEO, Tom. And Tom has really brought in a strong team of quite experienced professionals. Mm-hmm. So we're all coming from industry. I'd say that we're a pretty professionally mature team. Which has been an immense value add, again, in an industry that's complicated and regulated like insurance is. There's around a dozen of us right now, and most of the team have actually worked together in some capacity in the past. So for us, we've been, again, everything is a blessing and a curse, right? So far we've had the blessing of mostly building the team of people that we know. And again, Tom has been an incredibly, strong and proactive leader in like really piecing people together with very complementary skill sets. The exciting and at the same time challenging part is we've actually hired only very few team members from outside of the people we know. So, and we're soon going to be hitting this kind of level of scale where we're going to want to hire from outside of the networks that we already have. So, I mean, everything is a challenge. Well, so like, you can look at everything from two sides, right? Like on the one hand, that's going to be a challenging new thing for us to bring. On the other hand, we've done work internally on figuring out, okay, so what are our values? How are we trying to attract candidates? How do we think about kind of, we've organically brought this team together of people who do come in with similar mindsets, but we're doing the work to actually figure out, well, how do we distill those values? How can we communicate it to people out, external to our networks to attract more talent in?
Absolutely. And yes, doing that kind of honest assessment of, what's great about this, but also what's limiting about this, because there always will be, especially when it's a team of people that all have a similar background or all know each other. And I love that kind of culture building exercise of where are we today, and let's be honest about what our current culture is. But actually, where would we like our culture to be? And how do we now, through this next phase of hiring, take our culture from what it is today to where we want it to be? Who do we need to add? And, what skills and what approaches and mindsets and values do we need to add to kind of create this, living, breathing thing, I suppose. Yeah, it's a fascinating journey to be on. And are you guys remote? Are you in person? And has that been something you've been intentional about to this point? Or is it kind of organically developed as you built the team out?
So we're a hybrid team. Having said that, we're only hybrid where it's really necessary. So we do prefer for the team to be in person where it's possible. it just, being in person in one hub, it does help you bring together more ideas. There's more inertia. There's a lot of sense of urgency that we have as every startup. That's kind of really infectious. This big energy carries really easily in person, and it's more challenging to bring in, for people who work remotely. Having said that, it's also important for us to bring in the right talent. So we, also have to meet people where they are. So we have our main offices in London, but we do have some people who work remotely. We do have a smaller office in Bristol. So we really, really strongly believe in the in-person culture. But at the same time, when there's amazing team members who can't join us in London, we are building out more of like a hybrid and more flexible team, so that we, it's not in person at any cost. It's in person's preferred, but we don't let that limit us in bringing talent in.
Amazing. And what do you foresee as you continue to build the team out? What do you foresee as being some of the challenges you think you're going to be likely to face in that journey? Is it going to be around finding the deep experts, in different fields, or is it more likely to be around finding more generalists that are really bought in and understand your mission? Where do you foresee these challenges coming?
Oof. I mean, from the examples that you gave, I can definitely see them from both sides.
Yeah.
I think that the big challenge is going to be bringing in people who are value aligned and who appreciate the sense of urgency that we really have. I mean, of course, in commercially scaling as a startup, but B, as a company that's heavily impact focused, heavily climate focused. Really, if we're late in, if we're late in developing our product, we could miss a hurricane season, and that could be just like a huge impact that we have missed. So I think that it's going to be, of course, it has to be somebody whose skill sets work with us. Of course, we're going to have to balance this, generalist roles versus highly specialist roles. But it's really the culture, finding the culture fits for us. And the other challenge genuinely is going to be, how do we scale and maintain this culture that we really value the culture of transparency. We're heavily scientifically rooted, but also very pragmatic about how we apply the science and how fast we have to move, and finding kind of this really fine balance in a pretty technical field. Getting the culture fit right is what's going to be the biggest challenge for us.
Totally. I think that's such an interesting point about how, when you grow the business, being able to maintain that culture. I think that's really interesting, and needing to check back in constantly to make sure you're on track with that, and making sure that the processes and policies that you're implementing are only serving that culture and not actually detracting from what you say it is. I think, there's lots to be unpicked on that journey, but I think, sounds like you're going into it eyes wide open, at least. So you're thinking about it.
You only find out about the challenges when you encounter them. So you can.
Yeah, exactly. This is true. No matter how especially with people being people, you can never foresee what the problems are going to be. There you go. So what are you most excited about over this next kind of 12 to 18 months for MaxInfo? What are the sort of key milestones you're looking to achieve? What should we be watching this space for?
Just the next level of scale for us. So we have our MVP in the market. I've mentioned that we're building out this more anticipatory focused product, which will be launching next year. So successful product launch is going to be a huge part of our journey that we're all extremely excited about. And that then all the things that every startup thinks about, reaching your revenue milestones, just being a really, really great product for your customers. We're going through this, iterative journey where we improve the product all the time, and just being the thing that really helps our customers manage their cat risk better and more efficiently. Just being the go-to catastrophe modeling company and catastrophe model evaluation company, and the lead in new way of structuring risk transfer product. That's the most exciting part.
Amazing. So just scaling up the business, taking it to the next level and being that kind of go-to domain expert in that space that you operate in. Yeah. Amazing. And I always close these episodes out asking you for one piece of advice that you would have for other founders who are on this journey. What resources, tools, communities have you personally lent on over the years that you would recommend to others?
Oh, one piece of advice. I cannot promise you to give one.
Give me a few.
Impossible. I think I'd highlight three things.
Mm-hmm.
The first one of them would be actually a community of other entrepreneurs. So, when you think about all the accelerator programs, incubators, cohorts of this and that, I think that the biggest value I've gotten out of these almost every time was actually the community of founders who were at a similar stage of the journey, and where we could really support and lean on each other. In terms of networks, I mean, Climate Connection is always the highlight in the London calendar. So if I had to pin down one, I'd recommend that. Yeah. For a book, I'd recommend a classic, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Mm-hmm. And the really, really important one that I think founders and entrepreneurs often overlook is to take care of our own health and take care of our, just physical fitness. Because once, that there's so much stress coming your way, there's going to be blows coming in from every side. And physical resilience and like our physical strength and our physical fitness 100% helps build out the mental resilience and the stress resilience. And it's a really easy piece to miss on the journey, where we always, entrepreneurs just think about the business first, and we forget that once the tectonic plate of our health and our personal resilience, once that erodes, the business and the mission you're on will also suffer.
And I think sometimes from founders, there can be this, this sense that maybe you're being selfish or self-indulgent by taking that time out of the day to exercise or to spend an hour going on a run. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's so crucial to building that self-resilience. And also it's selfless in a way, because the better set up you are to succeed, the better you can support your team. So yeah, I think that's a really valuable one. Thank you.
Yeah. And then all the other things.
Amazing. Rozalie, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being so generous with your insights, sharing your experience to this point, and also for telling us all about MaxInfo and the very exciting journey that you're on. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, we look forward to watching what you and the team achieve over the coming months.
Jerry, thanks so much for your time, and it was a pleasure.